Encircled, her spear broke. Then a human fell from the sky. Mind if I join the fight? Lyra's hands shook as she gripped the shaft of her spear. The Velari warrior had faced danger before, but never like this. Around her, the ground was torn, scorched, and alive with motion. Strange creatures with jagged limbs and glowing eyes advanced, encircling her in a tight ring. She had trained for battle, trained for the impossible, but nothing in her life had prepared her for this moment. The first creature lunged. Lyra swung her spear with practiced precision, striking the alien's arm. Sparks danced across the metal tip, but instead of shattering the creature, her spear's tip cracked against an invisible shield. The alien hesitated, as if laughing with its glowing eyes. Another attack came from the left. Lyra spun, parrying and dodging, but the swarm was relentless. Her spear vibrated and then snapped. The shaft broke. The weapon she had relied on for years now lay in pieces at her feet. A cold wave of panic hit her. Without her spear, she was vulnerable. The creatures closed in, their movements quick, precise, and frighteningly coordinated. Her heart raced. Every instinct screamed to run, but there was no escape. The cliff edges behind her were sharp, the ground treacherous, and the alien predators seemed to anticipate her every move. Lyra took a deep breath. She forced herself to stay calm. She had survived worse. She would survive this too. Her eyes darted around, looking for anything, any weapon, any advantage. Her fingers brushed against a fallen branch. Not ideal, but it was something. Suddenly, a sound split the air above her. A sharp whistling, then a bright flash. Lyra's eyes went wide. Something or someone was falling from the sky. Before she could react, a human landed between her and the creatures. The ground shook slightly under his landing, and a small cloud of dust rose. He dusted himself off casually, as if dropping from the sky was part of a normal day. "Mind if I join the fight?" he asked. Lyra froze. She had heard tales of humans, rare travelers from distant worlds, but never had she seen one up close. Humans were unpredictable, known for cleverness and daring, but they were also strange. Unlike any Velari warrior she had ever met. The human's eyes scanned the encircling creatures. He didn't look scared, not even a little. He crouched, then leapt forward with astonishing speed. Using a small, metallic device he pulled from his belt, he triggered a flare that exploded with a brilliant burst of light. The creatures hissed, shielding their eyes. Lyra blinked. That was clever, not brute force, just thinking fast. The human moved with confidence, dodging attacks and leading some of the creatures into a small gorge where they tripped over jagged rocks. It was like watching a dance, fast, chaotic, and impossible to predict. Lyra recovered, holding her branch tightly. She had no idea what the human was doing, but she knew instinctively to follow his lead. She leapt to her right, swinging the branch at a creature that had broken through the temporary barrier created by the flare. The creature recoiled, startled, giving her enough time to shove it toward the gorge. The human grinned briefly at her. "Nice work, keep it up." He used the environment, not brute strength. He seemed to anticipate the creature's movements, exploiting their weaknesses almost instinctively. For the first time, Lyra felt hope. She wasn't alone anymore. The creatures regrouped, circling around them again. Lyra's small stick was laughably inadequate, but the human didn't panic. He picked up a handful of gravel and flung it at the nearest creature. It struck the alien's face, momentarily blinding it. Seizing the moment, he darted forward and grabbed a dangling vine from a nearby tree, swinging it like a lasso. He pulled one of the creatures off balance, sending it stumbling toward the rocks below. Lyra stared. She had never imagined fighting alongside a human, yet the combination was incredible. The human's actions gave her time to recover, to think, and to strike effectively even with her limited tools. "Name Jace," he said, swinging the vine to knock another alien backward. "And you are?" I don't understand how you're doing this." The creatures hissed in unison, circling faster. Lyra realized they were adapting to his tricks. They had survived countless predators and attacks, yet this human kept turning the situation to his favor. Lyra took a deep breath. "We need to move," she said. "We can't stay here. They'll trap us." "Good call." He scanned the terrain quickly and pointed to a narrow canyon that led deeper into the strange world. "That way. They can't fit all of them at once." They ducked behind rocks, swung across vines, and used the uneven terrain to create confusion. At one point, a massive creature lunged at Lyra from the cliff above. She froze, knowing she couldn't dodge in time. But before it could strike, Jace shot a small flare that burst directly above the creature's head. The bright light blinded it for a second, long enough for Lyra to roll to safety. "Thanks," she panted. "No problem," he said casually, dusting his hands. "Just another day in the life. Now we can control the fight." He began setting up small traps using rocks and vines. Each trap was precise, designed to slow the creatures without harming them permanently. It was strange. Lyra had always been trained to strike to kill, but this human showed a different kind of power, control through cleverness. As they moved, Lyra noticed something remarkable. The human's energy was infectious. She felt herself thinking faster, noticing patterns she had never seen before. She ducked, twisted, and struck with timing that would have been impossible before. The combination of Velari skill and human ingenuity was turning a desperate battle into something manageable. Hours, or perhaps minutes, time seemed distorted, passed as they fought their way through the canyon. The creatures grew frustrated, hissing and screeching, but they couldn't break the humans' clever traps or Lyra's renewed skill. Slowly, they were being driven back, herding them into a corner where escape was impossible. Finally, the swarm paused. It was as if the creatures were reconsidering their attack, sensing they had underestimated their opponents. Lyra wiped sweat from her brow, her breathing heavy but steady. She looked at Jace. You make this look easy," she said. Jace grinned. "It's all about thinking ahead. Humans adapt. We don't just fight, we change the rules." She had never considered that strength could come from the mind, that courage could be paired with cleverness rather than sheer force. She realized that, with Jace, she had a chance, not just to survive but to win against overwhelming odds. The canyon was quiet now. The creatures lingered at the edges, wary, but their focus had shifted. Lyra and Jace stood together, catching their breath. They were battered, tired, but not broken. For the first time, Lyra felt something she hadn't expected: hope. Hope because humans were unpredictable. Hope because humans could solve problems that seemed impossible. And hope because she was no longer alone. Above them, the sky shimmered with the twin suns of the alien world. Lyra looked at Jace, ready to follow wherever he led. Whatever lay ahead, she knew this was the beginning of a partnership that could change everything. And somewhere deep inside, she felt a thrill. A thrill that humans, this human, might just be the spark the Velari needed to survive a world that seemed determined to destroy them. The canyon stretched before them like a twisting maze, its walls carved by ancient rivers long gone. Lyra's muscles ached from the battle, but her mind was alive, alert, and buzzing with new possibilities. Beside her, Jace walked confidently, examining the terrain as though it were a puzzle waiting to be solved. "We need to keep moving," he said casually, scanning the shadows. "Those creatures will regroup and they'll be smarter this time." She trusted him more than she trusted herself right now. Jace's movements were precise, fluid, and full of purpose. Where she saw danger, he saw opportunity. As they moved deeper into the canyon, the world around them began to change. The walls narrowed, glowing fungi clinging to the rock face. Strange vines hung like curtains, swaying gently despite the lack of wind. The air was thick with a sweet, almost metallic scent, and every step echoed unnaturally. "This place," Lyra whispered, "it feels alive." They make a different sound under pressure depending on weight. If we pay attention, we can use all of it. Their conversation was cut short as a low, resonant growl echoed through the canyon. Lyra stiffened. Jace crouched instinctively, scanning the shadows. "They're back," he said, "and not alone this time." They moved in silence, but their presence was terrifying. Jace didn't panic. Instead, he pulled a small device from his belt and tapped it, sending a sharp, high-frequency pulse into the air. A faint hum filled the canyon and some of the creatures froze, confused by the unfamiliar sound. "Humans are messy," he said with a grin, "but effective." But effective, that was undeniable. She realized that the human's creativity was as powerful as her training, perhaps even more so when combined with her skills. "Follow my lead," he said, crouching low. "Use what you know, but try to think differently. Adapt." But instead of meeting them head-on, Jace led them through a series of clever maneuvers. He triggered small rock slides to block paths, used the shadows to hide their presence, and even tossed glowing fungi to distract the creatures. Lyra found herself learning from him in real time. She noticed the subtle changes in the creatures' movements, their patterns, and the way they responded to certain stimuli. Slowly, she began to anticipate what Jace would do next, and even started improvising her own tricks. At one point, a massive creature charged straight at them. Lyra froze for a fraction of a second, but Jace shouted, "To the left!" She rolled, planting her feet just as the creature smashed into the ground where she had been. "That was close," she panted. "Too close," Jace said calmly. "But we survived, that's what matters. We can funnel them here. They can't all fit at once." A thin, silver line shot out and wrapped around one of the creature's legs, tripping it forward. Lyra's eyes widened. She had never seen a trap like this. "Humans are tricky," he said with a grin. "We like to make life difficult for our enemies." And for the first time in her life, she felt that hope wasn't impossible. As they continued, Lyra and Jace began talking. She learned that he was from a distant planet called Earth, a place Velari had only heard about in stories. He explained that humans were explorers, problem solvers, and sometimes reckless, but always adaptable. Lyra shared her own story. She was a warrior of the Velari, trained from childhood to protect her people and survive against any threat, but she admitted that she had never seen anyone fight like Jace. "Your mind is your greatest weapon," he said, nodding. "You've got the skills, the reflexes, but you need to think outside the rules. That's where humans shine." Velari warriors prided themselves on discipline and precision, but maybe there was more to survival than strength and skill. Maybe, she realized, humans had something Velari lacked: creative thinking under pressure. The canyon opened into a wide basin filled with jagged rocks and strange, glowing plants. The creatures followed cautiously, clearly wary of the traps they had encountered. Lyra and Jace set up a series of devices to guide the creatures into the center of the basin. Rocks teetered on ledges, vines were tied into clever snares, and a few of the glowing plants were used as distractions. Lyra's heart pounded as they executed the plan. The creatures hesitated, then moved forward, triggering the first traps. Some fell into shallow pits, others were slowed by vines. The creatures hissed and roared, but they were contained, not destroyed. Lyra stared at Jace in amazement. "You're amazing," she said. He shrugged. "Humans are good at this. We don't just fight, we think our way out of problems." It wasn't just strength, it was strategy, creativity, and partnership. She had never felt so alive. Finally, the last of the creatures were contained within a clever trap, a series of rocks and vines that prevented escape without causing harm. Lyra stepped back, breathing heavily but smiling. She had survived, and so had the creatures. Jace looked at her, a grin on his face. "See, that's how humans do it." She realized that the universe was bigger than she had ever known, and humans were a force she had underestimated. As the twin suns dipped toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the canyon, Lyra and Jace prepared to move again. They were tired, battered, but not broken. The creatures were contained for now, but the world was full of unknown dangers, and they would face them together. Lyra felt a thrill she hadn't felt in years. The human beside her was unpredictable, clever, and courageous. Together, they had turned a desperate situation into a manageable one. She realized that this was only the beginning, and that humans, with their creativity and adaptability, were the spark that could change everything. And deep inside, Lyra knew one thing for certain. She had never fought alongside anyone like this before, and she never would forget it. Twin suns dipped behind the jagged horizon, and the alien world changed its face. The glowing plants in the basin brightened, casting soft blue and green light across the rocks. Shadows stretched long and thin, and the air grew cooler. Lyra stood still, listening. Something was different. The creatures they had trapped earlier were no longer restless. Instead of hissing or moving, they were silent. Too silent. Jace noticed it too. He crouched beside one of the glowing plants, adjusting a small sensor from his belt. His face grew serious. "They're not gone," he said softly. "They're waiting." Waiting for what? At first it was faint, almost like a distant vibration. Then it grew stronger, steady and deep, like a heartbeat coming from the planet itself. Lyra stopped. "Do you feel that?" The glow from the plants grew brighter the closer they came, until the entire canyon was filled with shimmering light. At the center of a wide clearing stood something Lyra had never seen before. A massive crystal structure rose from the ground, pulsing slowly with energy. Light flowed through it like liquid, changing color with each pulse. The air around it shimmered, bending slightly, as if space itself was unsure how to behave near it. Lyra stared in awe. "What is that?" "It's sending signals." They formed a wide circle around the crystal and the two allies inside it. Their glowing eyes reflected the light of the structure, making them look almost unreal. Lyra's instincts screamed at her to prepare for battle, but she stopped herself. Jace hadn't reached for a weapon. Instead, he slowly raised his hands, palms open. "We don't need to fight," he said quietly, more to Lyra than the creatures. "They're not enemies, they're guardians." She lowered her weapon and placed it gently on the ground. The creature's eyes flickered. The crystal pulsed brighter. Jace glanced at it. "That thing reacts to intention or emotion. Hard to tell." Jace tapped quickly on his device, reading data faster than Lyra could follow. "This crystal stabilizes the region," he said. "Without it, the land would collapse. The creatures evolved around it. They don't attack for no reason. They protect balance. For everyone." One extended a limb toward the crystal, and the light steadied, calming. Jace smiled slightly. "They're showing us." The tension vanished. Lyra opened her eyes, stunned. "It listens." "They followed me." Their leader frowned. "We were told this place was hostile." The creatures stepped back, satisfied. The crystal's light steadied. Jace let out a slow breath. "That," he said quietly, "is a turning point." And he showed me a better way. Humans were not powerful because of weapons. They were powerful because they adapted, listened, and changed the rules. And the universe, no matter how vast or dangerous, responded to that. As they walked toward the horizon, Lyra knew the final challenge still awaited, convincing her people, protecting this world. But she was no longer alone. And with a human at her side, she believed, truly believed, that impossible problems could be solved. The journey back to the Velarri settlement was quiet but heavy with thought. Lyra walked at the front, her posture strong but her mind full. Behind her followed the Velarri scouts, no longer tense, no longer hostile. And beside her walked Jace, the human who had fallen from the sky and changed everything without firing a single destructive shot. The world around them felt different now. The land no longer seemed threatening. The glowing plants pulsed gently, lighting their path. The air felt calm, almost welcoming. Lyra realized the planet had never been dangerous. It had only been misunderstood. When the Velarri settlement came into view, the guards stiffened. Weapons were raised at once. Whispers spread quickly when they saw Lyra return, not alone but with a human. Lyra raised her hand. "Stand down," she said clearly. "There is no threat." Jace gave an awkward wave. "Hi," he said quietly, "peaceful visit." "And now you return with a human." She spoke of traps made without harm, of learning instead of fighting, of a human who solved problems by thinking differently. The hall was silent. Some elders looked doubtful, others looked curious. One elder turned to Jace. "Is this true?" "Our scanners showed danger." Jace looked up sharply. "The crystal," he said, "it's reacting." "And humans." The creatures remained calm, watching but no longer wary. The planet responded to care, not control. Lyra observed closely. Humans didn't command the process. They adjusted, tested, listened. When something didn't work, they changed approach without pride or anger. She realized something important. Humans were not fearless. They were comfortable with uncertainty. One evening, Lyra and Jace stood on a ridge overlooking the basin. The crystal glowed peacefully below, the creatures resting nearby. "You could have left," Lyra said. "You didn't have to stay." Humans ask, what if not? They ask questions before making decisions. Slowly, trust spread. Lyra watched as species that had once avoided each other began working together. Humans became the bridge, not because they were strongest, but because they adapted to everyone. One elder said it best: humans do not fit the universe. They make the universe fit cooperation. The Velari settlement grew into a shared outpost. The planet thrived. The crystal pulsed steadily, balanced and strong. Lyra became a representative between species, not a warrior anymore, but a guardian of understanding. Jace prepared to leave one morning. His ship waited quietly, ready to return him to the stars. "You're going?" Lyra asked. He nodded. "That's what humans do. We help, then we move on." You'd be surprised how many humans are still learning that. Not with force, but with curiosity. That was humanity's real power. Where others saw enemies, humans saw puzzles. Where others chose destruction, humans chose adaptation. And where the universe expected conflict,